N-O-S-T, Nost, H-E-A-I-N, again,
Nostagain. Hi there, I'm Richy. Welcome to another episode of Memorabilia.mp4 with the Nostagain Network. We are super excited today to be talking with Chris Moore, professor at Concordia University. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Hi there. This is your home, yes?
This is my home. Welcome.
Can we come in?
Of course.
Oh, thank you so much. After you, Derek.
I'm a vampire, you shouldn't have done that.
And I just noticed, other than this sort of clock over here, there's also this telephone down here. You have a sort of an interesting relationship with rotary telephones.
Yeah, so over the years I've amassed over 200 rotary dial telephones. I bought them when I was a student in my undergrad. I would go home almost every day with another phone or vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
I could get them for like $0.25 a piece.
I remember in our talk before we met you, you were talking about how on your way home you passed by this store, and you'd always go in and you'd leave with something.
Yeah, it was like the Central Goodwill store in Toronto, and they had an underground annex next to it, which I kind of nicknamed the Not Good Enough for Goodwill, because it was the stuff that no one else wanted, but I loved and appreciated, so I was able to amass a lot of stuff for very little money, which has now increased in value over the years. A lot of my collection, when I was acquiring it, it was not, the taste of the time. And so I was able to get a lot of things quite cheaply, and they've now become much more popular, like a lot of mid-century modern stuff. So I guess I've been a beneficiary of being out of style and out of taste.
But at the right time.
At the right time, yeah.
Just for some viewers who probably recognize this, and those who don't, can you talk just a little bit about this tray as you did earlier?
Yeah, so this is produced by Cartel, which is an Italian company, and it's designed by Joe Colombo. And it was very popular among architects and artists because of the various compartments for storing tools. It has, some holes for pencils and paintbrushes and that kind of thing.
Was it sort of used within artistic practices, in classrooms, in offices? Where were they most used during its prime?
Generally like in artist studios or architecture studios, although I imagine maybe in hair salons even.
Oh yeah. Especially with hair.
I'm speculating. It's late 60s, so this one's probably from around 1968.
Yep. I guess if Rapunzel came to get her haircut, maybe. And these trays over here, are they part of the set? Tell or no, this is sort of your
no,
two and two together.
These are designed by Massimo Vignali for Heller. He's the one behind, if you can see behind you, the redesign of the New York City subway map and all the signage systems in New York. So that's an original map from 1973 that's never been opened.
Wow. Let's move on to the next shelf, perhaps, and see where and how you've sort of collated these memorabilia, for lack of a better word.
They all came from my old place. Some have been with me for longer than others. I started collecting these transistor radios by Panasonic. They're from 1970. These ones are called Panapets because they have a chain attached to them, so it was you would kind of swing the radio along with you as though you might be leading like a dog on a leash.
We're in the 60s now, right?
1970, but close enough.
It's in the stars. I'm listening to music. Put some music over this, otherwise.
You're gonna look real.
Chris, what other objects here are sort of emblems of their time? So if this was sort of what they were looking at, that sort of kish-ass, that sort of progression to try out new styles, maybe a futuristic hint. What here do you consider timeless? Let's put it that way. Do you at all? Or they're all timed in a way. They're all sort of from that.
Most of them are all from a particular moment in time. So a lot of the transistor radios and some other things from around 1970. We have to remember the moon landing in 1969. It caused quite a craze and interest in space travel, and so the aesthetics of products and furniture at the time really kind of emulated that kind of sense of hopefulness, and we're in an era of the Vietnam War as well, and so people, I think, were looking for an escape and a way to kind of reimagine a future that could be much more hopeful and to dream outside the present in a way. And this also happens, in tandem with kind of post-World War II and this kind of economic stimulation. And so companies were putting out a lot of products that were kind of novelty and kitschy, in order to fuel this kind of mass consumption that followed World War II.
I'm curious too, in terms of that history that's so imbued in sort of the becoming of these objects. We are now presented this as a sort of visual order, as a collection. You've sort of given structure to these cultural contexts, but when you encounter each of these items, you encounter them in totally different, like maybe they were sort of grouped in other ways. They were lonesome objects, they were maybe discarded, like the not so good goodwill, for example. How did it take you? What's the process like, or how many iterations did it take until you found this sort of harmony between these objects? Like, for example, these two and two together, or the spouse of the other one.
I'm a designer, and I kind of operate intuitively, but I think it also comes from my my background, and trying to find, there's a specific kind of placement of different colors. So you see the color red, it's kind of peppered throughout and not sort of clustered together. But then I found these both in the same secondhand store, and I thought that they belonged together, which I know sounds really weird, but I like to see relationships between objects, and I also like grouping of collections. So like the radios together and so on. But I also like really mundane things. So the SML came from a small town department store that was going out of business, and these were just markers, for sizing charts, like for sweaters. And I just liked the coloration, and so I bought them for like $0.25 or something. So I mix kind of like everyday things with things that I find much more kind of collectible and valuable.
It's as if the archives are already always out there. Just, some objects, even though they don't belong in your collection, are already grouped harmoniously together. If we then move on to this section of your home, I think you have a wonderful story, probably the most striking one when we first talked to you, about these two chairs.
Yeah.
You can tell us a little bit about them.
Okay, sure. So this is where my collecting really began, these two chairs. My sister was moving into her first apartment, and so we went to that Goodwill that I mentioned in Toronto, and there was a dining room set with 6 chairs and a table. And I was 14 years old, and I just thought, wow, these are really kind of spacey, and they remind me of the Jetsons, and I just had to have them. And reluctantly, my parents allowed me to buy 2 of them for $5 each, and we had to drive for about 3 hours in a car filled with 5 people with these chairs upturned on our seats. And it was many, many years later when I went to art school when I discovered who the designer of them were. And it was Eero Saarinen, and unbeknownst to me, these are real icons of 20th century design, and are now very, very valuable and collectible. So the adult in me is kicking myself for not acquiring the entire dining set, but 14-year-old me didn't know better. So I've come to learn much more about the history of design, and it's mainly through my collecting practice. So I tended to act really kind of on instinct, not knowing the history of these things or whether they were valuable or not. I just like them for their form and their color and their aesthetics.
And just one more piece of object as well that we just were talking about, Chris, which is this over here, right? This sort of how you scored that deal in terms of not only the monetary value, but sort of the luck behind it. Just tell us a little bit about how you came across this piece.
So this is an example of a Clairtone stereo from the 1960s. It's part of their G3 series that they created. And at the time, Clairtone was a leading audio producer in the world. I saw an exhibition of Clairtone stereos over the years, and I recognized this when I was at a flea market in rural Ontario, and so I bought it for $40, and more recently I've seen one go for auction for $10,000. So
what was your reaction when you found that out at an auction for
I
that
was
price?
like, oh, I should be taking better care of it, I guess.
Just a quick question as well for our viewers who are a little confused. Are these three folks part of your collection too? Because some people are like, what? Who? What?
Just wandering, looking around.
No, they're part of Nostagain.
I want to talk more about kind of the obsession with spheres, and I feel your opinions on, like the form of a sphere in a globe and how it translated into this post-war optimism is very interesting to hear.
Okay, yeah, well, you kind of summed it up.
Good student.
No, definitely that kind of notion of the post-war optimism and this kind of this enthusiasm and the aesthetics and the forms that a lot of things took during that period were really referencing that kind of space race. Like I'm looking over here at this JVC Videosphere television, which came out in 1970, and very much resembles like a space helmet. I've always been quite interested in this kind of retrofuturism.
I'm curious, Chris, especially with your connection with retrofuturism, when you look back at these and when people ask you about them, often I'm thinking, oh, that's where I secured them from. Oh, yes, that's from that era. Do you still feel that sort of tang of hope that was instilled back then? Is that hope still imbued in these objects for you today, or has it evolved to become something else for you entirely?
I think there is that same spirit that in my relationship to these objects and how I interpret them. Of course, I didn't live through the era of, or maybe it's not obvious, but of many of these objects. But I like that kind of sense of optimism. It's kind of why I like coming home to this collection, because it brings me a certain sense of joy and it uplifts me. So that same kind of spirit is still exists for me, even though the world in which we live, it's hard to maintain that kind of sense of optimism and positivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think in design, I would say it's completely gone, but I would argue maybe that in design today, the focus on the shape and unexpected beauty and aesthetic and shapes, and I don't see that as much anymore, and as much as you have displayed in your collection. So I think that's such a beautiful thing to highlight and to really in your collection.
Well, there's kind of a celebration of freedom of expression and taking risks. I think contemporary design, it's like if you go looking for furniture, it's all kind of muted and beige and rectilinear, and like these more organic forms. I think like suggest alternatives, like challenging the archetype of what is a chair, what is a television, what is a telephone. And not just sort of replicating what came from the past, but really imagining something that never existed before. And so I think that kind of innovation and playfulness is something that inspires me, both in my own approach to design, but also in my artistic practice and the projects that I work on, which are very much based in playfulness and humor.
I wonder how you react to this statement that Nostagain sort of has been working on ever since it started, with different events, that it's possible to use nostalgia for the future. I'm sort of triggered by this set over here where it's very much your collections, but it's in a dining room, so it's a very social, you're not just collecting the aesthetics, but also the stories. There's always something out there waiting for you to come and find you, right? In relation to that statement, whether you agree or not, that it's possible to use nostalgia for the future.
I think it picks up on the thread that we were talking about of this optimism, and if we can look back to models where there was sort of an optimistic kind of sense of what the future could be. I mean, the way I describe a lot of my work and my research is trying to design our way out of the present. So looking at where we are now and how we could imagine futures that are much more healthy, you know? And I mean healthy not only in terms of our bodies, but healthy in terms of societies and how we relate to one another. And so I think looking back, it shows that in the face of adversity, that there can still be some sort of positivity. I was talking earlier about, you know, the 1939 New York World's Fair. It was coming at the tail end of the Great Depression and just before the involvement in World War II. So there was this small window of time where the world of tomorrow, which was the theme of the expo, sort of presented these radical futures of flying cars, and, you know, like, people were free to kind of imagine a situation, you know, coming out of a period of austerity with the Depression, and it was sort of like, you know, there's some hope, you know, like, and then again, you know, returning to a period of austerity during World War II. You know, we kind of go through these ebbs and flows of, you know, kind of this sense of hope for the future, and then this kind of pessimism as well. And I think, you know, we need to look towards some sort of symbols that, you know, that counteract that in ways. And it goes back to, that's why I like coming home. You know, no matter what's happened during the day, I can briefly, you know, have a smile and a laugh at things, or just be inspired for my own kind of creative work.
That's a funny way to turn nostalgia from homesickness to the sickness of the world and healing in your own home. That's a generative sort of
Safe
twist.
haven nostalgia.
I mean, because a lot of this stuff I never lived through, so it's kind of like I don't know if there's a term for it, but like a false nostalgia kind of. Oh, okay. So there we go. But,
Yeah, a little piece of home you get to bring with you while the rest of the world is going on out there.
I was just thinking about how you were talking about the precision between the corner of your clock and the corner of the light switch, and the satisfaction of that, the precision, the control, or something. And it seems to be part of how you organize it orients how you feel, and the precision in the way that you place it is almost as integral as the object itself. I see it as this relationship you have with the objects. It's sort of like they come alive with your care and your placement, as opposed to, you know, in a store, or it's almost like this diffractive. The value of them diffracts through you and your view of them, your lens, and then they become alive again in the current time. They're from another time, but they're alive now through you.
Yeah, like when the objects are out in the real world, in the wild, you know, like they're kind of decontextualized in a way, and by bringing them into the collection, they gain new meaning through their relationship to each other. In a way, it becomes my curated vision of, you know, what appeals to me, and it tells you everything you need to know about me just to enter into the space. And, you know, I was saying, I think this is the most people I've ever had in my space at one time, ever. You know, because I'm very protective of, you know, these things which are very special to me.
It means a great deal for us to, you know, for you to let us be here, and especially for us to also let others know about it, who will definitely resonate. Those 14-year-olds out there who just started to play their Jetson chairs, for example, don't give up, you know? I'm just wondering, as a sort of maybe final message, do you have sort of anything to say to maybe those folks out there who I'm sure you must have heard, or not only passionate collectors, but they've always had this sort of galactic backpacking gene with them, that they were born this way, that they keep hearing this often critique that something is valuable only when there's a price point that matches it, or it's valuable because historically there's a significance. Yet for you, you always lead with how you and it has a relationality, and then, I found out it was auctioned at $10,000. Just if you have maybe a final message on how we today ascribe value, with maybe how perhaps the Romantics or whomever prescribe value in a different way.
This is such a wonderful experience, and it's so nice to see people who also appreciate the value in objects. And so even more immediately, before any of this airs, like, this is such a phenomenal thing to get to witness.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate people who appreciate the significance that these things play in my life. And you're right, it's not about monetary value. I have 3 storage units in 3 different provinces full of stuff. And everyone, well, a lot of people tell me, well, why don't you put it on eBay? You can make a lot of money from it. And for me, even though I don't go to those storage units frequently, there's something about the stories behind them. And there are multiple stories. So there's the story of the origin of the artifact, which is I'm removed from, but I can learn about. And then there's the story of how I acquired it. And then there's the story of how it's persisted, you know, in relation to everything else that joins my family, you know, my family of things, you know. But I mean, this is something I teach in my classes too. You know, it's like everything has a story to tell. We just have to listen. And even the most mundane thing is like, you know, a big ballpoint pen, you know, there's an origin story. There's, you know, a story about its relationship to things like sustainability and disposable culture and, you know, all of these ideas like that are all kind of released by a single artifact if we allow that artifact to tell its story to us.
I wanted to say, if folks wanted to learn more about this, we'll put in Chris Moore's links and contact information as well, and obviously watch our memorabilia episode. But as this sort of absolutely standalone extras interview, I just want to say it means a great deal again for us to be here, Chris, and your collection, I've reflected as you spoke, does not feel like a museum, does not feel like a thrift store, it does not feel bombarded by an era. It feels, because of you, like home, since we started to now. So thank you for making home for us.
Oh, you're most welcome.
It means a
I'm
lot.
glad you appreciate it.